Welcome everyone to week 6, day 1 of the wonderful CSI 1 class. And today we are going to talk a little bit more about fallacies and then probably move on to cognitive biases as well. So the first straw man that we're going to talk about is the first fallacy we're going to talk about is the straw man argument. So straw man argument is when you're arguing with somebody and you misportray their argument. And usually it's in a fairly significant way. And so the most famous example of this is Cathy Newman's interview with Jordan Peterson, where she just over and over again says, so what you're saying is that women shouldn't work in industry. And Jordan Peterson says, no, I didn't say that. So what you're saying is we should be like lobsters. No, I didn't say that. And just over and so what you're saying is, and it was so bad that it became kind of a meme. And so you can watch the link there if you want. We're not going to spend class time on it, but it's a pretty fantastic argument. Fantastic in the sense that it was fantastical. Very common online. Usually when people are arguing online, they will misread the other person's argument. A very common mistake is to drop all nuance from the other person's argument. So if you're saying that it's okay for people to drive cars because 1 out of 1,000 people will get into a serious car accident, they get injured. So what you're saying is, if that's okay, then it'd be okay to just injure every person in America. No, I'm not saying that. Just eliminating all nuance, some versus all versus none, a rare thing becoming a common thing, that kind of stuff. Very common way of misreading somebody, and the unfortunate reality is it's hard to tell. The unfortunate reality is it's very common, but it's hard to tell oftentimes if they just mentally didn't read it, or if they're intentionally trying to distort your argument, trying to make you look bad, right? And so there's a notion that's the opposite of straw manning, which is to steel man somebody, which is to rephrase somebody else's argument in as good a term as possible. And you'll see me doing this in this class whenever I present like a philosophical argument, like for consequentialism or deontology or things like that. I generally try to make it sound as reasonable as possible. I don't actually think that all of the theories of truth are equal in terms of validity, but I will do what I can to make them sound good. Okay. And so that's called steel manning somebody's argument. Straw manning, though, is a very bad practice, and it's very common as well. So again, somebody says X, and you said, well, if Y is true, then that's a contradiction. So obviously X is not true. And the person's like, I didn't say Y, I said X. You're arguing against somebody that's not me. Person A, I don't believe in God. Person B, so you must consider murder to be morally acceptable and humans having no intrinsic value. Just a straight straw man there, right? Like, there's no connection between these things. They just immediately leapt to some, something, there is, I think, a substantial minority of people that think that atheists can't be virtuous. Traditionally speaking, if you look at the philosophical writings of people like Martin Luther and things like that, that the notion is that humans are inherently sinful and can only not be sinful through the grace of God. And so the 400-year later result of that is that a lot of Americans still don't trust atheists in, for example, politicians and things like that. And so a lot of atheist politicians keep their atheism on the down low, or they'll go to church and then not act very religious, which might just be the result of them Big politicians. Who knows? Okay. It's hard to tell. So person A, I think that it is a good idea to allow more commercial logging in our national forests. Well, I would hate to see Yosemite clear cut. Why would you want to clear cut Yosemite? It's like, no, it's not. It's not what I said. A national forest isn't a national park. Like, it's a completely different, like, beast, you know. And so in this case, person B is kind of ignorant of the difference between like BLM managed land, national forests, national parks, things like that. And they also went from more, all right, more. There's it's called a quantifier, and we're going to be learning that on SciBooks this week about quantifiers. Words like none, some, all, you know, things like that. Small amount, medium amount, big amount. You know, they add nuance to a argument. And so, for example, person A might want more logging because it would help reduce fire risk, for example. And person B is like, well, if you want more logging, clearly you want all trees to be chopped down across America, everywhere, in every place, and every time, right? No, it's like, no. You know, that's a classic example of a strawman. Do you guys understand? Have you guys ever seen people do this online, where they will lose all nuance? You know. Yeah, and you know that's an actual headline, right? URL not found. Fantastic. Trump wants national forests to become clear cut for lumber. Yeah. So. That's everyone's go-to in online games. Yeah. That and talking about your mother, as far as we can tell. So straw man arguments. Person A says one thing. Person B argues against something they didn't say, and it's very easy to argue against these kind of ridiculous hyperbolic arguments, like, well, where would we have any trees if all the trees have been cut down? You know, it's like, yeah, that's really easy to argue against. You know, whereas arguing against something that has nuance in it, like, let's cut down a few more trees that'll help clear out the, I don't know, the you know, excess overgrowth and things like that. You know, for example, one thing that a lot of people don't know is that Native Americans actually spent a fair bit of their time managing the lands around them, right? Like when settlers from England and France came to North America, wow, this land is just so, there's nobody here, and like it's just so nicely maintained. It's what a weird thing. And, you know, what happened was that there were outbreaks of smallpox and disease that had wiped out Native American villages, and a lot of people think that was deliberate, but it's just, you know, it was not, right? Like, it was by and large just there's disease spreads, right? And the contact between the Americas and the Europe was very, very tragically, horribly, tremendously devastating to the populations of North and South America, because they didn't have the immunities to disease that the Europeans had. And but anyway, my point is, when they got there, they looked at all these well-maintained forests and things like that, and the people had died by and large, and they're like, wow, this is what an amazing thing. Like, how you know, and so the notion of like natural beauty and things like that, like, it's just like, leave it alone, you know. And the Native Americans had been sort of managing the forests, and, you know, like nowadays we have like a forest service, you know. Native Americans had been kind of doing that for thousands of years, and but we had this notion of like, just leave it alone, you know, and appreciate the natural beauty, and then you get like all this overgrowth and big devastating fires and things like that. Judge, my client pleads oopsie daisies. Right. Controlled burns, yeah, exactly, yeah. Deliberately starting fires and things like that to clear out undergrowth and things like that. And so as the result of the policy of putting out fires, it made the underbrush even worse, right? And so during the 60s, 70s, 80s, like, if there was a forest fire, we'd put it out immediately, and then that would just cause more and more density to come up, and then we would get these huge devastating fires. as a result of it. And so, yeah, that's just an aside. But the all that sort of nuance typically gets lost on people, right? Like, you know, what, the Native Americans didn't just leave nature, alone. No, it was their environment. They maintained it. And yeah, so sometimes these things are just due to ignorance. There's a lot of most people aren't aware that like something like 80-90% of all people living in North and South America like died from disease. And like it was like one of the greatest human tragedies of all time. And like just people know about Native Americans dying of the disease and things like that, but like the extent and scope of it is beyond belief. Like entire civilizations collapsed and things like that as a result of it. So sometimes strawman arguments are the results of that. Like, they just don't know better. But most of the time, it's the result of like words like more or some or things like that getting just erased. So you just think, oh, you want to clear cut, all of Yosemite, which is a park anyway. Okay. So ad hominem. Ad hominem is not what people think it is. Unless you think it's the right thing, in which case you're right, and good for you. So ad hominem is not when somebody, curses at somebody online, right? Like if the reason why I don't like playing with rando people on the internet is because I don't know if you guys know this, but a lot of them are rude. Is this have you guys ever seen this before? Like somebody being rude on the internet, like playing Halo or something, and it's especially bad if you're on like an open voice chat channel with random people on the internet. What was the most recent example? I've been playing a little bit of Red Dead Redemption 2 online. I don't know if you guys know this, but they released an online, like an MMORPG that's $5, and it's beautiful game, and it's not the story. It's just you just wander around the world and shoot deer and stuff. I don't know. And have you seen Twitter? Yeah, yeah. Literally, pull up any politician's Twitter feed, and you will see people attacking them. A personal attack is not an ad hominem. A personal attack is called a personal attack, and a personal attack is like you're a moron. Here, somebody name a politician. Let's do a live experiment. Somebody name any politician. Biden, Ted Cruz. that'll be an easy one, right? Ted Cruz, because he just went to Cancun, right, during the frost thing in Texas. Let's see. Father of two, Heidi Cruz. Okay, if this is wrong, no problem. All right, so let's see if he got ratioed. Yeah. Okay, reply to join the. You can't view You can't view comments. I'm happy to work with almost any other GOP that aren't trying to get me killed, right? So that would be that would be a straw man, right? Actually, because Ted Cruz wasn't trying to actually get AOC killed, so that would actually be a good example of a straw man argument there. Let's see if we can find the Texas thing. Twitter feed, no. So I would have to log in on Twitter, and that's something I kind of refuse to do. I kind of hate Twitter because of all of the ad hominems on there. But basically, you can pull up any politicians at a Twitter feed, and you can find people making personal attacks on them. Okay, so an ad hominem does not mean a personal attack. This is the point I really want to emphasize to you guys here. An ad hominem is not the same thing as a personal attack. It may be a personal attack, but you can make a personal attack without making an ad hominem. Okay. So, if people use the two terms interchangeably, they're not the same thing. So an ad hominem is when you say an argument is wrong because of the person making it. Okay? So, if you say that AOC's new Green Deal plan is wrong because she's a moron, that's an ad hominem. Okay, and that's a thing that a lot of Republicans have been doing. There was some blonde representative who said, "See, AOC, you've taken the heat off us blonde people," or something like that. As the new dummy. And that So if you say something's wrong because somebody's dumb, that's an ad hominem. It's when you try to respond to an argument, and you try to attack the argument by attacking the person, by making it about the person making it. Does that make sense? So all of these fallacies are about arguments and argumentation. Okay, a person's trying to make a point. This is actually a very famous kind of ad hominem, which is called a reductio ad Hitlerum, where this is so common that there's actually a name for it. When you compare somebody to Hitler, right? My parents use this argument on you all the time. They steal the IQ to mine the Dogecoin. Jeff Bezos. Bernie, yeah. Right, and so somebody makes an argument, and they say, well, of course you would make that argument. You're a Democrat / Republican / Independent / whatever. That's not a counter-argument. That's not a counter-argument. You have to counter the argument. By attacking the person making an argument, it does nothing, right? Because Hitler drank water, right? But that doesn't make drinking water bad. You know what I mean? And so Hitler was actually a fan of gun control, vegetarianism, and animal rights. And these are things very popular with the Democratic Party today, right? But that doesn't make them Hitler. You know what I mean? Like, just because Hitler loved animals and supported animal rights and was for gun control and was a vegetarian, which he was, that doesn't make the Democratic Party Hitler. Or when they propose it, attacking it because Hitler also made it is an ad hominem. Okay, and then on the other side, Democrats compare every Republican president since Nixon to Hitler, right? As well, they probably would have done it to Eisenhower too, except he literally led the charge against Hitler, and it probably wouldn't work very well. And so, I don't know if you've seen this meme. This one. I don't know if you guys can see that, but yeah, classic example of an ad hominem, right? Where you compare somebody to Hitler, and you have that substitute for a counter argument, right? Only somebody who's Hitler would support the Keystone XL pipeline. Well, that's not a counter argument, and a lot of people apparently think it is, But and both Republicans and Democrats do this. I don't know what modern politics would look like if there hadn't been World War II. Like I seriously think that half of all tweets in existence wouldn't exist, because they're like, well, that would be something a bad person would say, right? Like, what would they even do? Like, if there wasn't a Hitler and a Stalin and a Mao, like, what would all these ad hominems even, that's a Genghis Khan thing, that reminds me of Napoleon Bonaparte, old Boney. Probably not. You like Germany, you must like Hitler. Cancel him. Water kept Hitler alive. Water literally saved the Reich. Water is Hitler. Yeah, it's just, ad hominems are so common. Okay, but see, here's the thing. Personal attack, you're an asshole. That's a personal attack. Okay, that's not an ad hominem. An ad hominem is when I say your argument is wrong because you're an asshole. Okay, you guys understand the difference between the two? So an ad hominem can be a personal attack. Might not. Sometimes you can have a personal attack. It's not an ad hominem. There's a difference. Okay. Person A, I think vegetarianism is an ethical duty. So they've proposed a claim, okay? And person B could ask them to support that claim, right? Like, an argument is a claim supported by evidence. And so person A has made a claim, but they have not presented any evidence for it. You know what I mean? Like, person B, a legitimate response person B could give is like, all right, what is the evidence that vegetarianism is an ethical duty? And if person A says, well, it just is, then person B would say, well, you haven't presented any evidence for it, therefore you have not actually made an argument, you've just made a claim. I could just make a naked claim too. I could say vegetarianism is not an ethical duty. Boom, done. We've got an equal amount of evidence for it, you know. But instead, person B went on the attack ad hominem, and Republicans do this. You know, whenever gun control and vegetarianism and animal rights comes up, they'll be like, you know who else supported animal rights? Hitler. Yeah. And so person B has made an ad hominem because they attacked the person making it. Not in this case, they're not attacking person A. They're attacking somebody else who made the same argument. Okay. An ad hominem could be a personal attack, but a personal attack is not necessarily an ad hominem. Yes, that's correct, Mr. Reyes. They're related, but an ad hominem is specifically when you're saying an argument is wrong because of the person making it. Okay. If there are gamers who are rude, then all gamers are rude. That would be kind of a false generalization. Maybe another way of putting it would be like, we shouldn't listen to gamers because they're rude. Like if a gamer makes a point, then you could say, well, I don't need to pay any attention to your point because you're a gamer and gamers are rude. Something like that. That would be an ad hominem. You attack the person making it instead of the argument. Okay. So socialism is a dangerous political and economic system that leads to tyranny. Okay. So that would be a claim, and that could be supported with, looking at history, right? And then person B could defend it also by looking at, some of what we would call like democratic socialistic systems, which tend to be more mild than Soviet Russia, right? Which you disagree with them and it's straight to the gulag, all that kind of stuff. Depending on the time period of the USSR, but yeah, like so person A could support this with various books, citations, things like that. Person B could defend it by pointing to other citations and facts and things like that. But person B doesn't take that right to jail, straight to jail. That's right. Undercook the fish, overcook the fish. Believe it or not, straight to jail. So person B says that is something only a reactionary fascist bougie would say. All right. So that is a ad hominem, right? And it's also a fairly common ad hominem. If you ever hang out on like what's it called? Jin Mao or whatever it is. They if you disagree with them, they'll just attack you for being reactionary instead of dealing with the argument. Right? So very very common response. When you don't have a counter argument, just attack the person. That's all. Read more theory. So, do you guys understand the difference between ad hominem and a personal attack? Maybe I'll put up a true or false quiz that separates them. So, an ad hominem is specifically when you're attacking an argument because of the person, right? And an ad hominem is against an argument. Personal attack is against a person. And so, if you make a personal attack to defeat an ad hominem, if you make a personal attack to defeat an argument, that's an ad hominem. Because, if Hitler said 2 + 2 = 4, he's right, So, like, the source of an argument doesn't make it right or wrong, right? A proposition is true or false on its own grounds, you know what I mean? So, there was a funny scene a couple of weeks ago during the GameStop bubble when AOC and Ted Cruz were both calling for investigations on Robinhood, and Ted Cruz actually retweeted AOC and said he agreed with her, and that was that response you saw a second ago, where she's like, "Thanks, but I'd rather not have a guy who's trying to murder me," So, if you don't like Christmas, you must be the Grinch. Yeah. Okay. So. There's a whole set of memes like this which have like NFL referees making different signs, and You can find these online. There's a whole set of them. Maybe it'll help you study. I don't know. You are going to have a midterm on Friday, so it might be worth getting flashcards. I don't know. Do politicians not take logic classes in college? Good question. Most the most popular profession for politicians is lawyer or poli-sci major. A lot of poli-sci majors want to be lawyers, and so it's guaranteed maybe not guaranteed, but they've probably taken this class, right? Because you have to understand argumentation to be a lawyer. You know what I mean? Like, I guess you don't have to understand it, but no, more likely, it's deliberate. You know what I mean? More likely, it's deliberate. So when people go after Bernie Sanders, they portray him as the next coming of Stalin, right? And it's an unfair comparison, but he calls himself a socialist, and guess who else was a socialist? Stalin, right? And since Stalin wanted to, send people straight to Gulag, then Bernie Sanders must too. And if you notice me jumping back and forth between attacking one party and the other, it's deliberate. So it's not. I don't think they don't know it. I think they know it and use it, right? They're using the powers of critical thinking for evil instead of for good. So if you guys want to go into politics or maybe public affairs or things like that, all these can be used the other way. Oh, yes, there's that argument called a correlation is not causation. Yeah, maybe I'll bust that one out to defend my company. Okay, so tu quoque is an accusation of hypocrisy. And accusations of hypocrisy are... there's actually a place and time for that, right? If you're in a debate and somebody says... I don't want to pick on anyone in particular, but hey, you are pro-life, you're against abortion. However, when you got your mistress pregnant, you had her get an abortion. You're a hypocrite, right? And so there's kind of a time and a place for accusations of hypocrisy when you claim that people don't actually believe what they profess to believe. However, tu quoque is specifically about an argument again, and so like if you're in a political debate and somebody makes a claim like I believe in pro-life. If you can point out, look, you forced your mistress to get an abortion, you're actually countering the claim, because you're saying, no, you actually don't believe it. You're pretending to believe it to pander to your base, but you actually don't believe it. So there is a time and a place to point out hypocrisy, right? Or in an argument, if somebody contradicts themselves, you can point out, look, you're trying to play both sides of the game right now. But an example of when this would be a fallacy is when, for example, during the Cold War period, the U.S. would constantly accuse the USSR of having bad civil rights, which was true, right? Yeah, I don't think anybody can claim that the USSR was a bastion of human and civil rights, and so the USSR, rather than countering the argument, because they couldn't, the USSR would accuse the USSR also of having poor civil rights, all right? And that's not a counter argument. Do you guys understand? Like if you say, well, you do it too, that's not a counter argument. It's possible both countries are horrible about civil rights, right? At the time, the U.S. was accusing of the USSR of going straight to Gulag. The U.S., which the USSR was rightly pointing out, the phrase that they always used was, and yet you're lynching blacks. And that was absolutely the case. There was a huge problem in the U.S. at the time of lynching black people. A black guy would look at a white woman the wrong way and they would lynch him. It was really horrible. It was a really bad situation. But that didn't make the Gulag situation good. You know what I mean? So the U.S. makes a claim, you're sending people straight to Gulag, and the USSR doesn't respond to the claim. They just say you're bad also. It's quite possible both are true. You know what I mean? It's not a counter argument, right? That do you guys understand? Like if somebody presents an argument mentioning that they didn't counter the argument. They didn't say, no, our civil rights are great, we have freedom of speech, you know, da, da, da. No, they just said, you do it too. So that's a tu quoque. It's an appeal to hypocrisy. And you know, if like one criminal says to another criminal, hey man, you shouldn't rob that old lady, it's not right. And the other criminal says, hey, you rob people too, man. Not a counter argument. Do you guys understand? That's a tu quoque. It just becomes another claim. That's correct. It's not a counter argument. It's just you know, like, yeah, man, but I don't rob old ladies. But hey, you rob people, so what's the difference? Yeah, that's a tu quoque. You do it too. It doesn't. That doesn't make robbing the old lady right. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, maybe you're both assholes. You know, like, you know, maybe one of them is worse than the other. I don't know. So, since it distracts, it's a distraction. It's a deliberate distraction. Because what you do in cases like that is when you make it about the other person, you're trying to have a conversation about that now. Oh, yeah, but I don't rob old people. Yeah, but you robbed that old dude. Yeah, but I didn't know he was old. And then you start having a conversation not about, you know, me wanting to rob old people. We have a conversation about you instead. And so it's an attempt to derail the argument. It's an attempt to distract away from an uncomfortable point. And so that it also counts as a red herring fallacy. A red herring is when you try to deliberately distract away from the claim at hand without dealing with it. I would not pass the high school politics class. Yeah, because you got to get comfortable with using fallacies, right? And so yeah. So it was a phrase in the USSR. Which means you too, also. Yeah. Right. And so this was a common move that the USSR would use, right? Saying that the USSR had a problem with lynching, which was absolutely true. It absolutely was a problem, and it was used so often because that was all that the foreign ambassadors from Soviet Russia had was to distract. You know, they couldn't really defend themselves on their civil rights grounds. Okay. So the pot calling the kettle black is another. It's a common phrase, right? It's like, you know, I think you should do your homework. But what about you? You haven't done your homework. You know, that was used, maybe with one of my friends. We're studying Japanese. Like, dude, you need to be studying right now instead of playing games. Yeah, but you're not studying right now. I've already studied, my man. I've already studied. Yeah. It's like, do you guys see how that works? Claim, I think you should do your homework. You need to do your homework. You're going to fail the class if you don't sit down and memorize your hiragana. You know what I mean? You got one class, between one class and the next, to memorize all the hiragana, which is hard. You know, and you're sitting there playing World of Warcraft, you need to be working on your flashcards, my man. Hey, but you're just hanging out with me right now. You're not studying. You guys understand? Claim, and then bad counter argument. Okay? You have to learn to think about all of these arguments in this presentation are oftentimes, not all of them, but most of them, are between two different people. So you have person A, you have person B, and they're having a debate, a conversation. And this is different from the ones we did last week, where we have affirming the consequent and denying the antecedent, which is a formal, the logic doesn't follow. In this case, it's between two people. It's not one person making an argument and the logic falls apart. In most of them, a lot of times it's a back and forth, right? And so if person B doesn't actually counter person A's claim, then there's usually some sort of fallacy going on. It's an easy way to get out of providing a hard answer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Appeal to ignorance. So appeal to ignorance is another very misunderstood argument form. Every time I make a midterm question and one of the answers is appeal to ignorance, people will just pick it because it sounds ignorant. All cats are birds. All birds have feathers. Therefore, all cats are birds. Or no, sorry, all cats are birds. All birds have feathers. All cats have feathers. Right. And so the that's actually a valid deduction, right? That's modus ponens. All cats are birds. All birds have feathers. Therefore, all cats have feathers. Valid argument. Not sound. It's not sound because cats aren't birds, but it's a valid argument. But I'll put down on there like appeal to ignorance, and people are, well, that's ignorant. You know, no, that's not what it means. It's not. It's an appeal to ignorance isn't because the person making it is ignorant. An appeal to ignorance is a type of argument that is bad. And the form of the argument that is bad is this: I don't understand why something, therefore something. Okay, you can't make any argument of the form, well, I don't understand it, therefore, right? If you don't understand something, you can't basically make any sort of argument about it. I don't understand calculus, but from what I do understand, no. I don't understand calculus, but I'm pretty sure it tells us we can divide by 0. Well, does it? Like, that's not a valid argument, right? So it sounds like some game chat responses. I don't know who murdered your grandfather, therefore it is you. Classic bad detective, right? From a murder mystery. Well, we don't know who did it, so we're just going to accuse some random person of it. No, you can't do that. You have to have evidence for it. You know what I mean? So do you guys understand this? I don't understand X, therefore Y. Bad argument for him. Okay, this is different from just somebody being ignorant. Right? All cats are birds. Appeal to ignorance. No. I don't understand X, therefore Y. That's an appeal to ignorance fallacy. Do you guys understand? Calculus? What is calculus? I don't know. I think it has something to do with like when you get like plaque on your teeth and it hardens. It's called calculus, right? That would be an equivocation fallacy, right? Because that is what it's called. It's called calculus when you get plaque buildup. But if you're jumping back and forth between math calculus and dental calculus, then that would be an equivocation fallacy. Calculators, AP calculus, AB, PTSD flashbacks. I don't know why the Earth is flat, therefore God made it. I don't know why Earth is flat, therefore God made it. Yeah, there's two different things going on there. There's a claim that the Earth is flat and saying why, but yeah, sure. We don't know why the universe was created, therefore God did it. Is a classic appeal to ignorance fallacy, right? Could have been anything, therefore God. Well, no, I thought you just said it could be anything, right? It could be two kobolds in a trench coat, if it could be anything, you know what I mean? Calculus are those things form on your hands, yeah. Play the guitar enough, you'll get calculus. No. Calculus BC was fun. AP stats is a pain. Yeah, stats is something though that every person needs to do, honestly. And I talked about this before, but like the only way that you can really navigate the world is through stats, because the world is a noisy, messy place. There's going to be exceptional events happening every once in a while, and you need to understand how to look at data and like draw conclusions from it, how to draw inferences from data. And if you don't, you'll just fall prey to all these kinds of things, right? For example, last night I was watching a video where of the 48 million people vaccinated with the COVID, the first shot of the COVID vaccine, 0.003% of them died within a couple days. And so the anti-vax people were like, well, look, it killed 1,000 people, right? And if you had just left those 48 million people alone, those 1,000 people wouldn't have died. Bad stats. Why? Who are the shots given to? Old people. Right? As it turns out, a lot of old people just kind of die because they're old. You know what I mean? And so if you have 48 million old people and you look at a span of a few days, and there's probably going to be 1,000 of them dying anyway, right? But all of those cases were investigated, and they wanted to see if it was due to, the vaccine or not, and it wasn't. But anti-vaxxers will jump on numbers like that, saying we'll see. And you have to understand stats. Like, are you comparing the number against 0? Were you expecting 0 old people to die? Because I got news for you. And so when you understand stats, it starts making you kind of immune to a lot of bad arguments. So why give them the shots? Yeah, they're going to die anyway, right? Well, if you get the shots, you're probably not going to die from COVID. That's the benefit. Okay. So appeal to ignorance is a argument of the form, I don't know why, X, therefore Y. Then for atheists, there's the opposite argument, which is we don't know why physics are the way they are, but we can be sure it's not God. It's like, I thought you just said you don't understand why it is the way it is. You can't conclude anything from it. It could have been two kobolds in a trench coat. Like, you don't know. You just said so. So a few people die from it. They say, let's do one more test. Yeah, so as far as I know, not a single case was actually linked to the actual vaccine, right? So why give them the vaccine? Well, because of those 48 million people, some of them are going to die from COVID, right? And by giving them the vaccine, it's got a 95% efficacy rate. It'll keep a lot of them from dying. So you just have to look, you have to pay attention to the stats, or you can be vulnerable to a lot of bad information out there. So, so do you guys understand this form here? We don't know why X, therefore Y. Bad argument. No, not allowed. Okay. And then finally is, I don't want to say the most popular, because a lot of these are popular. Strawman's really popular. Hominem's really popular. Man, like, the online world is just a cesspool. Like, that's what, like, you saw, I'm not logged in on Twitter because I technically have a Twitter account, and I've tweeted like once in my life because it was the only way that I could reach an author that I was trying to invite to Comic-Con. I was forming a panel at San Diego Comic-Con, and I was trying to get a hold of Robin D. Laws, one of my favorite RPG authors, and the only contact information I could find for him was on Twitter, so I signed up on Twitter and tweeted him like, hey man, you want to be on my panel at San Diego Comic-Con? And he's like, no, I'm not going to Comic-Con. I was like, all right, cool. That's, I think, the only time I've tweeted. Maybe one other time just to see how it worked. But I kind of hate Twitter with a passion. Right? So anyhow, the online world is just full of fallacies. And this one, though, this one's actually used in real life, like in terms of like business, like actual people making serious business decisions and things like that. And a lot of bad business decisions is from this fallacy right here. And this fallacy is called correlation is causation. You might have heard this phrase, correlation is not causation. That's the correct belief. Just because two variables move the same way does not mean that they are causing each other. So there's this great website here that will draw spurious conclusions from different data sets. For example, you can see that the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool over the years, over the past 22 years, no, that's only a 10-year block from 1999 to 2009. You can see that there's a pretty tight correlation between the number of films that Nicolas Cage appeared in and the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool. Therefore, the fallacy goes, the more movies that Nicolas Cage makes, the more likely people are to fall into a pool. You guys understand? So it's got a R value of 0.6, which is a fairly good correlation. Like that's a strong correlation right there, right? And if you want to look at this one, U.S. spending on science, space, and technologies has been going up over the years, and the suicides by hanging, strangulation, suffocation also goes up. And you can see this one has a very tight correlation. This has a 0.99 correlation. That's an amazingly strong correlation. And so a lot of people would look at these numbers, and if you just erase these words here, because if you look at the words, you know that this is complete nonsense. If you were to look at these two data series, a person would say, well, clearly there is something causal going on here, that one of them is causing the other, and we need to find out which, right? These two things are correlated very tightly. As it turns out, they're completely unrelated, right? There's absolutely no causal factor, as far as I am aware, of U.S. spending on science, space, and technology, and suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation. There's absolutely no causal connection whatsoever. They're not causing each other. But if you were to erase these words and just look at this graph here, a lot of people would look at that and be like, oh yeah, clearly one of these is causing the other. Maybe they're both causing each other. We need to find out which. Okay. Per capita cheese consumption is 0.94. Damn, that's a strong correlation. We need to spend some money finding out why eating more cheese causes people to die because they are tangled in their bed sheets. You know what I mean? It's an amazing amount of people too. 800 people a year. It's incredible. So, fortunately, we see more people saying correlation is not causation. Yeah, and that's a phrase that everybody should learn. Everybody in this class should learn this phrase right here. Correlation is not causation. Okay? Correlation is not causation. Just because two things correlate with each other doesn't mean they cause each other. The most famous example of this is the polio epidemic, right? The polio epidemic was, I think, in the 1950s. There was polio for a long time, but in the 1950s there was a surge in polio, and nobody knew why, and it was terrifying because, you know, all of a sudden you have 50,000 kids that are paralyzed. You know, it's like, damn, dude. One day they're like skipping and hopping and doing whatever it is kids do, and then the next day they're in an iron lung for the rest of their life. You know what I mean? And it was horrible. It was tragic, and people were searching for things to blame, and nobody knew why. And the way that science works is that, you know, science will detect correlations. This is a legitimate part of science, right? And so scientists went out there and they said, all right, what can we correlate polio with? And they found that polio went up when people ate more ice cream. And they found that polio went up the more that people swam. And so they shut down pools, and they said, don't eat ice cream, it'll give your kids polio. And it was complete nonsense. And the reason why it was complete nonsense was because they were both caused by warmer weather, right? And so they detected a spurious correlation, right? It had nothing to do with eating ice cream. It had nothing to do with swimming, right? It was caused by the fact that warmer weather, you know, people eat more ice cream when it gets warm, right? How do you get tangled in your bed sheets and die? I have honestly no idea. But it does seem like an awfully embarrassing way of dying, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so this would be a false correlation. But they legitimately started closing swimming pools and blamed ice cream and stuff like that. And maybe that's acceptable. You know, here's the thing. Like, when you're in the middle of an epidemic and you see a correlation like that, like, maybe I would do the same thing, right? Because people don't need to swim, right? And people don't need to eat ice cream. It's probably going to be healthier for them anyway. So, you know, maybe try banning them and see if the polio rates go down. You know what I mean? So that's a legitimate part of science, but it was wrong. They believed it was causal. They believed that eating ice cream caused polio, and it didn't. And they believed that swimming caused polio. It didn't. Right? It was a false causation or false correlation. Right? And so at Fannie Mae, which is the world's largest repurchaser of mortgages, they claim that home ownership, if you own a home, it will help you make more money, right? Like, we need to get more people into houses because that will drive up the income of Americans. Because people that have more money own more houses. We have done a study and found that rich people tend to own their houses. So if you buy a house, you'll become rich. You guys understand why that's wrong? Right there? Do you see what the problem is? Like, rich people tend to own homes. Therefore, if you buy a home, you'll become rich. Do you guys understand do you guys see what's wrong with that? What's the problem with that argument? Take out a loan, buy a home, and get rich. Easy. Yeah, that's all it takes. That's all it takes. They buy houses because they're rich. Yeah, if you have money, buy a house. Why not, right? Buying a home takes a lot of money to begin with. Right. Exactly. And one of the reasons why we had the housing bubble was because they were trying to get more poor people into houses. And then the people defaulted on their loans because they're poor. And then it took out the U.S. economy 13 years ago. Can the GameStop example also be correlation as causation? Give me an argument, and I'll tell you. You can also rent. You can, yeah. But the thing is, like, people that have a couple extra $100,000 floating around probably aren't going to be renting, right? They might, they could, but you know, if you got money for it, buy a house. You know, when you own a house, you can do things you can't do when you rent. Like you can modify the house, which is kind of fun. Repaint it, tear out the garden, put in a different garden. Yeah. It's like Animal Crossing in real life. Yeah, but the really scary thing about correlation is causation fallacy. COVID cases went down when GME stock rose. Therefore, if we go to the moon, COVID will go away. Yeah, that would be a perfect example. Very good, Garcia. That would be a perfect example of correlation is causation, right? Correlating GameStop's stock price to COVID rates. Right? There's no, as far as I know, I don't know either, but you know, maybe COVID is, the COVID viruses are all tracking the GameStop prices. They're all watching the NYSE, you know. Yeah. So the really scary thing about this one is that people use it. Like seriously, they use it. Like unironically. Like politicians will use this and this and this and this. Like that's the bread and butter of politicians, right? But correlation as causation is used by serious people like scientists and business people and stuff like that, because you don't. It actually takes a lot of effort to determine causation, right? And so it's very easy to do a correlation study, right? Epidemiologists is their bread and butter. You look at heart disease across a wide population, and you correlate it to their diet, and you correlate it to their exercise and things like that. And then you say, well, maybe if you exercise more, you won't have heart disease. Because it's hard to do an experiment. You'd have to get a group of 50-year-old people and have half of them exercise intensively, or maybe multiple groups, intensive and moderate and light and no exercise, and expect the people to stick to it, you know, like not actually exercise at all for a year, which would be kind of unethical in my opinion. And then at the end of the year, you see how many died of a heart attack or something like that. It's actually hard to do a good controlled, double-blind, randomized study. And so correlations are very easy to come up with. And the trouble is you can get a false correlation all the time. But sometimes that's all you have. And so you have to make decisions on imperfect information. Are you going to have a quiz on these fallacies? Yes, you are. Glad you asked. So ask questions now if you need more information on any of them. Ask now. Or forever hold your peace. Man jumps off an airplane, parachute falls, dies of COVID. Yeah. COVID went all in on GME. Yeah. That's why COVID rates went down. They were all jumping off of hotels. Is it going to be the same quiz as the first one? No, of course not. Why would it'll be similar, but it will be different questions. And these quizzes are not worth many points, by the way. So if you're not doing well on them, don't worry about it. They're all just like a couple points. And once we start doing like more stuff on critical thinking, like discussions and things like that, which we'll get to after the first midterm. The first third of this class, I'm just really focusing on logic and argumentation and things like that. And then we'll start having discussions on the discussion board in Canvas and things like that. And those will be worth a lot of points. And so don't worry about doing poorly on the quizzes or anything like that. They're just a couple points. In the greater scheme of things, you're not going to have much of an impact on your grade. Although right now, since it's the only thing in there, it might look terrible. That's what I meant, similar, yeah. Yeah, it'll be similar to it. Are we getting a study guide? There's a lot going on. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's in Canvas already, I think, right? Like the slides, and then I've got a I got a fallacies cheat sheet here for you guys. It's all up on campus in the file section. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah, that's 800 people a year. It's an epidemic. Forget about COVID. Let's figure out why people are dying because they get tangled in their bed sheets. My goodness. Age of Miss America. What will be included in the midterm? Everything we've talked about. Not the Scratch stuff, because we've only barely touched on Scratch. We'll be doing more programming in the next trimester, or whatever you want to call it. It's going to be on, like, what we've been doing these quizzes on. That's going to be the midterm. So that's why I give you guys quizzes. So you understand. The whole point of quizzes is not to punish you guys. It's to, like, if you don't understand something, it's a good idea to find that out prior to the midterm rather than on the midterm. You know, midterms ideally should not be learning experiences where you're like, oh, well, that's what valid means. You know, like, no. That's why I give you guys these quizzes, and if you potato on them, it's like a point off, whatever, out of the 1,000 or something in this class. It's trivial. But when you get something wrong, you're like, oh, I need to study that again. Yeah, that's fine. You know, and then on the midterm, you'll do better. Okay, that's why I do these quizzes. So, have I watched the storybooks yet? I have not. I've been busy working hard and playing Red Dead Redemption Online. So, I will get to them with my daughter. Okay, we're gonna do more Scratch after the midterm on Friday. Midterm is this Friday, yeah, and it'll be a 24-hour window. And once you start it, you'll have a window of time to finish it. This scares you? What scares you? Imagine sleeping with bed sheets. Right. At least he's honest. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Did you give up on Valheim? No. I played that for a few hours last night too. That was fun. There was already a quiz. Yeah, you got to be checking Canvas. Canvas will show you all the upcoming stuff that needs to be done. There will be another quiz after this class today on the fallacies we've had today, and you get a test to see if you understand them. So, yeah, I've developed a lot of new phobias, I think, of people due to this. All of a sudden, people are like, blankets only, no bed sheets. Just throw down like 4 comforters. That's. Okay, all right. See you guys. Yeah, it's 11 o'clock. We gotta go. But yeah, send me any messages if you have questions, and the midterm questions will be like the quiz questions, so you should be well prepared for them. Okay. All right. See you guys. When do quizzes come out? Usually I have classes through the afternoon, so usually after the afternoon, I put the quizzes together. Okay.